Welcome to Stats and Scheme. I am Sean Syed, joined as always by my good friend Tej Seth. Our big game breakdown is now available for free on sumersports.com. You can visit the site, press that big gold header at the top, get it sent directly to you. It has a ton of matchup data. It has some of the biggest questions that will decide the game and a lot of analysis along the way. Tej and I and many other people at Sumer contributed to it. And again, it's totally free. So I hope you check it out. Tej, how are you? Are you excited? You know, the good people got some more fancy graphics and some more numbers to look at today.
I mean, I do feel like a system quarterback with this Super Bowl preview because you put in so much work to it. Our designer, Lucy, Eric, like everyone put so much work into it. I was the first one to tweet it out. So everyone's replying under my tweet, thanking me and like saying like, oh, I appreciate you for putting this out. But you know, it was a team effort. I felt like I got carried a little bit, but it works out for sure.
Yeah, Tej, you know, no one's going to blame you for waking up a little bit extra early, being on East Coast time instead of everyone else. No one is going to blame you. But today we're going to talk about some of the biggest questions or, you know, a little bit of ideas just for the Super Bowl matchup as a way to preview the game, give you some of that stats and certainly scheme context for each of those questions. I think we'll split it up. We'll go 49ers offense versus Chiefs defense first. Then, of course, Chiefs offense versus 49ers defense. And then we can finish it off with some that kind of have crossover for both. So Tej, since you listen to me ramble on even when you send tweets earlier than everyone else is awake, why don't you go ahead and start us off with one of the first big questions for San Francisco offense versus Kansas City defense?
Yeah, I'm very excited to see this side of the ball play out. I think it'll be the more interesting side of the game. Not that the other side's not interesting. It'll just be really interesting to watch this like Death Star of 49ers offense against a Spags Chiefs defense. And I think that's something I'm going to keep my eye on throughout the game is what it's going to look like for Brock Purdy when he extends plays in this game. So Brock Purdy has been able to have a 0.29 EPA per play on plays when he moves outside of the pocket this season, which is the second best behind Josh Allen. Bootleg plays where he's moving outside of the pocket on like design rollouts only make up about 25% of those. So on the other 75% of plays, he's still doing a really good job of creating when he has to move outside of the tackle box. And you saw this in the NFC Championship game, right, against my Lions, where he was able to scramble multiple times for first downs. He's thrown touchdowns on the move as well. So he's done well outside of that. I think that's his biggest area of difference over Jimmy G and like why I think that he's been given this offense a new level over Jimmy Garoppolo. But on the other side of things, the Chiefs defense has allowed a negative 0.20 EPA per play when the quarterback moves outside the pocket, which is the second best defense in the NFL behind the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Chiefs have defensive backs that do a really good job of closing windows when a quarterback starts to move and to go past the structured part of the play. And then I also think that they're great at tackling. So they can actually tackle Purdy when needed. They can tackle any of the receivers past, a couple seconds after the play happens, time to throw wise. So I'm very interested to watch this play out.
A lot of good stuff there, Tej. I think that, you know, it's interesting in that stat, like Brock Purdy and Josh Allen right next to each other. Certainly not two quarterbacks that you pair together very often. I think you make a really good point that Purdy, in some ways, he's just not a typical Shanahan kind of like system quarterback. Even for me, sometimes I don't like the term game manager as like a general term, but even in this specific case, you know, Purdy has a lot of variance. He's going to extend those plays. He's going to get outside the pocket. And no one's saying that he's going to run like Lamar Jackson or anything like that. But as you said, we saw him escape against Detroit in really, really important ways that I thought were actually pretty big for the offense. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I agree with you in that the Chiefs defense, they are a window closing coverage unit. And we saw, I think it was Nick Bolton, where he like pretty much had a pick. I think it hit his hands against Lamar Jackson. It was kind of like a deep kind of going to Lamar Jackson's left of the field. And, you know, some defenses have had success with spot drop zone. You take away particular threats that San Francisco offense is trying to have. And, you know, if the passing concept doesn't always just end up open, Purdy moving off the spot is an effective way and has been an effective way for San Francisco to attack people. But, you know, Kansas City, as we're going to talk about Kansas City man coverage next, and like a bunch, I think, throughout this, because that's something they love to do. That's something that they're really good at. And, you know, if you get all those backs turned towards the quarterback, he may be able to pick up some yards there. So I'm so interested to see this part, because is it going to be where Purdy just makes dangerous throws when he escapes because, I do expect some pressure, at least from Kansas City's defensive line against San Francisco's offensive line. So I think that's just a great one to consider. Anything else on that, Tej, before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's talk about the next one here.
Yeah, I want to know how Kansas City is going to hold up in man coverage because, as I said, like it is so clear, like that is part of their identity. They have a really versatile defensive back room that I love to watch on film. As I said, they close windows, and it feels like just like an aggressive style of coverage where they're, a lot of times you're in your face. That you see Snead bumping Tyreek Hill in the I think it was the first round of the playoffs, right? And like you usually feel good in man coverage when you think you can hold up at all the individual matchups because it just takes one individual matchup for the offense to win for like your entire man coverage plan to kind of fall apart a little bit. And Tej, I don't know if any team feels good or should feel good playing man coverage against San Francisco because they have all 5 of those monsters that they often end up unguardable in and of themselves, but then also kind of within the scheme as well. And as we just kind of talked about Purdy escaping there. So is it an issue where you get into man coverage a bunch? Even if you do cover them, is it just Purdy escaping? So those are kind of my thoughts a little bit on if Kansas City can hold up in man coverage.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. When you look at and you mentioned like should any team feel comfortable playing man coverage against the 49ers, teams haven't really felt that comfortable doing that. Purdy has only seen man coverage on about 35% of dropbacks this season, but he's as the 49ers pass game is first in man coverage when facing man coverage with a 0.818 EPA per play. So when you have this, all these weapons, 58% success rate against man coverage, especially Brandon Ayuk, who's at a 65% success rate against man, George Kittle, who's a 70% success rate against man, and then Christian McCaffrey as well. Like you have all of these different weapons that can beat you when you play man coverage. And I've been looking into what predicts the amount of man coverage that will happen in an actual game. And the defense's rate of man coverage is a much stronger predictor than what the opposing offense has seen this year. So even though opposing defenses haven't played a lot of man coverage against the 49ers, I still think that the Chiefs will play a lot of man coverage against them. And then they're going to just have to play that really well because the 49ers have been so good against man coverage this season.
Tej, I know we went back and forth a little bit talking about it through the day. So you're pretty much saying that like a defense is like they're more responsible from kind of one game for the other or to the other. They're going to call a lot of the not the same things, but if they're a zone heavy team, that zone heavy mentality is likely to carry over as opposed to, hey, we're playing against a quarterback that usually beats zone coverage. We need to kind of morph everything we do. Is that kind of at least the takeaway from on the data side?
Yeah, exactly. And like getting down to the nuts and bolts of it, I was looking at the rate of man coverage that a quarterback has seen in a season compared to the rate of man coverage that the defense has played headed into any specific game, and then how much man coverage was actually played in that game. And so the defense controls a large portion of that linear regression formula with those two variables.
I think that, aside from the math, from kind of a schematic perspective, defenses do what they do, and they shouldn't just unwind every single thing they do because the offense, happens to be a man beating offense or a zone beating offense. And then also there are a lot of plays in an entire game. So it may be more that it's, hey, that we are a zone coverage team on this key third down. We're going to show you zone. We're going to flip into man coverage and get 2 guys over your biggest threat. And that is kind of the push and pull a little bit. And of course, defense is reactionary. I'm not sure if I would say it's more or less about fundamentals, but is those fundamental aspects of, hey, we're probably going to play one of 3 or 4 coverages. It is so much about the execution. So you can find unpredictability within the kind of larger umbrellas of man or zone coverage. But I probably agree with you and agree with the numbers that, we're not going to see this total flip in, Kansas City is now playing zone on 90% of snaps, but it may be this key snap, they're going to find different ways to kind of attack. And Tej, I know you wanted to talk a little bit, going into our next question here about Brandon Ayuk specifically, having success against L'Jarius Sneed, and then a little bit just about Chiefs defense versus wide receiver ones on the year.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this will be such a cool matchup to watch with how good Brandon Ayuk and L'Jarius Sneed have played this season. The Chiefs as a whole only give up 128 yards per game to wide receivers in the regular season, which is fifth best in the NFL. But when you hone in specifically on L'Jarius Sneed, they've only given up 43.8 yards per game to opposing offenses wide receiver one option. So that's determined by their target share per game. So this is a testament to how good L'Jarius Sneed has been as the Chiefs' number one corner. A great platform year for him as he's about to enter contract talks with the at least the Chiefs or maybe other teams. And the most yards that the Chiefs allowed to wide receiver one in the regular season was 73 yards to Devontae Adams. You look back to like the divisional round, Stephon Diggs, 21 yards, 0 touchdowns. Week 16, Devontae Adams in the second matchup, 4 yards, 0 touchdown. Stephon Diggs in the first Bills matchup, 24 yards, 0 touchdowns. A.J. Brown, 8 yards, 0 touchdowns. Like Devontae Smith went off in that game, but L'Jarius Sneed did a good job of stopping A.J. Brown specifically. So this is a very, very tough matchup for him. Brandon Ayuk finished the season third in yards per route run. We talked about earlier how good he's been against man coverage specifically. So maybe Kyle Shanahan uses motion and different alignments to his advantage to get Ayuk off of Sneed, or maybe they just have these two star players go head to head. That'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, Ayuk, he is just such a special route runner. I have loved seeing on film what Kansas City has done against wide receiver ones. And it's good on good, Tage. We're at the point in the season where there's no more like, this is like a really weak point against a weak point. It is just so clearly a good on good. I think that's what we're so lucky to have in this matchup. And as I do wonder, like you kind of mentioned, is it where is Ayuk going to be motioned a bunch? Is it like, hey, we're going to condense him more often than we usually do? Maybe get him involved in a stack a little bit to create that kind of natural friction against man coverage. If Sneed is pressed up on Ayuk when he is even condensed, is it something where Ayuk runs like an out and up because there's just more kind of outside space there? So that one's going to be fun one where hopefully the TV broadcast just gives us replay after replay of that. And then, as you said, in that Eagles game, I think Devontae Smith was able to have success where AJ Brown didn't have the same sort of like box score success. Maybe, you see Deebo Samuel, you see obviously George Kittle and the other guys, they're able to get it. So Tej, all right, these next two, they are tied together a little bit. One is I'm interested to see, is Steve Spagnuolo going to have success blitzing and against Brock Purdy? And I do think tied to that is can San Francisco, protect against Kansas City's just 4-player pass rush, so not even with a blitz. First, it's important. Can San Francisco even hold up against Kansas City's front four? Because I think I love that we keep saying the term, Shanahan's Death Star. If you point to one part of it that maybe is a little bit vulnerable, I think it's parts of the offensive line. In this game, in the Super Bowl, Charles Omenihu is going to be out for Kansas City, but I want to see Karlaftis and Jones lined up over that San Francisco's right side of the offensive line and see what happens. If they can't block 4, that is going to be really tough. But I do want to see if Spags is going to have to send pressure. I imagine he will send pressure just as part of his identity. And then what happens there is going to be important because Kansas City does a good job heating you up by sending that nickel off the edge. And, they drop the defensive end away. In the NFC Championship game, there was a play where a defensive lineman was dropping into a window. I think it wasn't that like it ruined Purdy's progression or anything, but like that's another thing you have to check for that I think is important. And San Francisco's pass protection, it's often set and forget it, where you're not going to see Purdy go to the line and repoint to Mike and kind of change the pass protection over and over because they're like the hots, they're like built into the passing concept. So like in the passing concept, it's kind of considered, hey, if we get a blitz, the ball's just going to go here. I think that Spags knows that. I think that there may be more like one or more times that we see a free runner. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what we get there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that Aaron Glenn tried to call some slot blitzes against Purdy and like to just do it a little bit differently because like when defenses have just straight up blitz Purdy this season, he's at a 0.42 EPA per play, which is by far the best in the NFL. You compare that to when he's not blitzed, 0.24 EPA per play, which is the second best. His average depth of target rises to 9.58, which is the 4th highest mark in the league, much higher than his ADOT when he's not blitzed. And Brandon Ayuk is the primary beneficiary of when Purdy's blitzed. They often throw deep to him on blitzes, 16.4 average depth of target when targeted against the blitz. George Kittle, Deebo Samuel have each seen 21 targets each when a blitz has been called, and they've done well on those. And then Christian McCaffrey will sometimes be used as like a last resort against the blitz, but not as often. So the 49ers are still able to get to their downfield passing game when blitz, which I think is really interesting and something that I think Spags is going to be a little bit cautious at the beginning of this game, maybe with his blitzes. And then when he's needed to, he's going to dial up the pressure, and it'll be interesting to see how Purdy handles that.
All right, Tej, let's get to our next one here. Will San Francisco's rushing attack just be too much for Kansas City's defense? Of course, you know how much I love the San Francisco rushing attack. If you want to read about all their different outside zones things, you can go to sumersports.com. There's that Shanahan schemes article that's kind of on the front page. Tej, why don't you take us through this one a little bit?
Yeah, so if there's one area of weakness for this Chiefs team, it is their run defense, and they've struggled when defending the run from both light and heavy boxes in this game. The 49ers see a high rate of heavy boxes just because of the Christian McCaffrey effect and the heavy personnel that they use. So I think that they are going to be tested a lot in this game, and out of heavy boxes too. So I think when Kansas City is in the heavy box, they rank 32nd in EPA per rush allowed, according to FTN data. So I'm sure Kyle Shanahan is going to want to spread out the defense, really get into his run concepts, especially early in the game, and see if the Chiefs can even stop that.
Taylor, so you said that the FTN data has them ranking like really bad. That's from light boxes, correct? Not again, or like
light boxes,
defense in light boxes. Yeah, that was such an interesting stat to see, and I'm so curious. Is this something where the 49ers look at that and say, well, they're having a lot of struggle getting these light boxes. Let's try and manufacture them, because if you're playing against San Francisco, you're usually not going to be playing light boxes. It doesn't make sense based on formation, personnel, and obviously like the actual groupings of players and the shifts and the motion. So I do wonder if it's something where you see a little bit more of that. I do think Kansas City's defense, in a lot of ways, they are built to stop the pass, and they are so good at that. Also, they've stepped up in the playoffs in terms of I think the defense has been great all year, but like we get playoff Chris Jones where he's now just making more stops. So that's really fun. I do think this team as a whole, from a defensive perspective, is fun to watch because it's so clearly like just a swarm mentality, which I mean, it's kind of like easy to say. I'm sure every defense wants to do that, but the Chiefs have safeties coming downhill. They have, like I said, Chris Jones in the playoffs, defensive lineman doing well. Nick Bolton, we get Drew Tranquill now in there making more plays. And I think we saw it really clearly against Baltimore, where when you see safeties coming downhill, making those tackles, or like the cornerbacks so clearly want to be involved with that. I love that from a defense. So I think this is a spot where I think Kansas City could outperform like just their regular season ranking. But obviously Christian McCaffrey is just very hard to deal with. And I think Shanahan will have a lot of fun, special stuff cooked up. So Chase, let's transition to the other side here, Kansas City offense versus San Francisco defense. And I need to know, maybe it's even silly to ask the question because the answer is probably yes. Like, is Patrick Mahomes invincible? Because he doesn't get sacked. He gets pressured, which I mean, every quarterback does, but he doesn't get sacked when he's pressured. He does not throw interceptable passes. He is like, he extends plays, but it's so clearly purposeful where, he's escaping with ease. You find a way to get rid of the ball that it just doesn't make physical sense a lot of times. So I think that San Francisco can create pressure on like the edges, specifically considering those specific matchups. But it's going to be important to see, is San Francisco going to be able to bring Mahomes to the ground at all? So I think that Mahomes is so special in so many ways. And I mean, can we talk about him any more ways? Probably yes. But I do think it is important that Mahomes is able to have such a low pressure to sack, and he's able to escape in those different ways, because it sometimes does feel like the offense is, let's keep chipping away. Like the Tyreek Hill throws over the top are like, unfortunately, a thing of the past for this team. And so they do really rely, I think, pretty heavily, or maybe not they rely, but they benefit so much from having Mahomes' like special traits in that way, aside from all of the other incredible things he does.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, I like so much what you said there, and we'll touch on this later. But these two teams are so predicated on yards after catch, and obviously yards after catch can only happen if completions are happening. And Mahomes' ability to not take sacks and to still get the ball in playmakers' hands has still been very impressive. Second best pressure to sack rate on the season. In the playoffs in particular, where I really think he's turned the dial up a little bit, is he's had 0 interceptable passes. You look at the games where it was against the Dolphins, against the Ravens, where he realized early that the offense was going to do enough to win the game because of the way that the defense was playing. And it was just him not putting the ball in harm's way. And I think he did a great job of that in both of those games. And then he hadn't taken a sack in the playoffs until the second half of the AFC Championship game. He's only taken 2 sacks on 40 pressures this entire season. So just like a great ability to avoid negative plays. And like I've always said this, but even if you just had the upper body of Patrick Mahomes, it would be a very high-end NFL quarterback. That what he does with his legs, like avoiding sacks, being able to scramble just like 3 or 4 times a game that are just back-breaking first down conversions on third down, just make him the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, we don't need to cut up Patrick Mahomes, upper body, lower body. I would argue the brain obviously has a lot to do there. I just think he is so good, and we could easily just not mention it at all because I think everyone, whatever it's a Super Bowl party, like they know Patrick Mahomes is really good. You think of like he has an absolute like rocket launcher attached to his arm. He can kind of like whatever if you call it like backyard football or anything like that. But I think he is like a genius of physical space. Like he understands that small area in the pocket just at like the most incredible level. All right, Ted, let's get to the next one here. How are the Chiefs gonna attack the edges in the run game?
So this is my favorite one because it's the first one I wrote up when we were doing our biggest questions on the big game breakdown, which you can find on sumersports.com. But the 49ers defense has allowed a 51% success rate to rushes outside the tackles this season. That's the 3rd worst mark in the entire NFL. This is even increased in the playoffs. They've allowed a 75% success rate to outside rushes in their games against the Packers and Lions. The Packers and Lions used these outside rushes 16 times. 6 of them went for over 10 yards, and only 2 of them have been stopped for a loss of yardage. So when you look at what the Packers and Lions were able to do, you think about that long Aaron Jones run late in the 4th quarter. You think about Jameson Williams' run to score a touchdown on the first drive of the game for the Lions. Like the 49ers have really been tested outside with their run defense, and they just haven't been able to have answers yet. So the problem for the Chiefs in this game is they haven't been good on outside zone or when they're running it outside. So I think that you're going to have to see some pitches, some pull leads, and then especially wide receiver runs in this game from Mecole Hardman and even Kadarius Toney if he's active. Like I mentioned with the Jameson Williams run, you're gonna want to see some runs from receivers in this game just to really test the 49ers on the edges. And you look at the Chiefs 49ers game last season where the Mecole Hardman was able to score 3 touchdowns. He had 2 rushes for 28 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then he had a pop pass that was basically a rush that turned into another touchdown. So I think it could be a big game for someone like him running the ball as long as they can hold on to it in this game.
Yeah, this is a huge one. As you said, Green Bay and Detroit both had success attacking the edge. San Francisco as a defense is relatively static. And if you get heavy, you can kind of slam down on those defensive ends, get the ball outside where we saw both the Lions and Packers able to do that against the 49ers defensive ends. It feels like this is a really specific type of run that Kansas City can use against San Francisco that the 49ers have shown on tape a few times over and over now that they've struggled with it. I do think Kansas City, they trust their interior offensive linemen a bit more. They probably want to get vertical in the run game, have Pacheco get downhill, but they have to test the edges. They have to have some sort of pin and pull. Like it doesn't make sense for them not to. Tej, I know you were trying to kind of soft launch the Mecole Hardman sweep is going to happen. How do you feel like that take has been received so far?
I was worried about tweeting that out because I thought people would, remind us of what happened against the Bills with Mecole Hardman. But I still think it's going to be a big game for him if the Chiefs need to. I think Andy Reid is going to have like the push in case of emergency button, and it's going to be Mecole Hardman, and they'll give the ball to him if they feel like their offense is trying to stall.
I love it. All right, James, let's get to the last one on this side of it. And I'm curious. We talked a little bit about it kind of on the other end, but I'm curious what the 49ers pass defense is going to do to deal with the Chiefs' plan of attack, because the 49ers are such a zone heavy defense. They really benefit from having a pretty strong 4-man rush. They can have 7 people in coverage. They can close windows in zone coverage as opposed to man coverage. You get Fred Warner that just covers so much space. And then on the opposite side of that, Travis Kelce is still absolutely incredible about feeling and finding the soft spots in zone and breaking off his route and settling in to open spaces. And then the Chiefs, we talked multiple times about how, like, who is their wide receiver 3? Is it after Kelsey and Rice? What is that third threat? So as we kind of talked a little bit before, I'm not going to expect the 49ers to say, we're going to play a ton of man coverage. It may be that on third down, they feel like, hey, we need to make sure that we're covering Mahomes' escape lanes. We don't feel like that the Chiefs receivers are really going to be able to kill us one-on-one. So that becomes man coverage. To me, it's, kind of an interesting one where my guess is the 49ers, they keep their normal plan of attack. And, we're going to see how much ground I think Fred Warner can cover.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, where the 49ers are going to control how much zone coverage they want to play in this game. They play it 63% of the time, which is the 4th highest rate in the league. And against zone coverage, Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, like you mentioned, have done well, but I think that they have struggled to find a third pass coverage against any type of defense, third type of pass catcher against any type of defense this year. So, even though that the Chiefs have done worse against man than they have zone, I still think the 49ers will stick to their zone coverage for a lot of the reasons why you talked about.
Does you just know there's going to be 2 MVS deep balls that are just going to be so backbreaking, and they're going to cut to Kyle Shanahan on the sideline. It's just going to be
Well, it'll be backbreaking for I mean, it could be for either team, depending on if he actually catches it or if the ball's in his hands and it's a drop, right?
That's a very important one. All right, so we're gonna get to kind of our 4 questions left, and they kind of cover both sides. So I think we can kind of group them in this spot. Tej, I think you're gonna go ahead and go first on these.
So something I'm really interested, I'm really curious in this game is who will win the screen game. So Patrick Mahomes led the NFL in percentage of passes that were screen passes, 15.7%. And this was very justified by the Chiefs, by Andy Reid. They had the 3rd highest EPA per pass on screen passes this season. And the 49ers are about an average defense at defending screens. So, Rashee Rice is the main target on screens, but Isaiah Pacheco also gets a decent amount of slip screens as well. On the 49ers side of things, they have been very good when throwing screen passes. A lot of them are either McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. Like Brandon Ayuk usually doesn't get screens. He's more of a downfield rusher. Deebo Samuel has gotten 17 targets on screens this year, a 77% success rate. So you're going to really need to see some great tackling from L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie on those plays. So that, the screens are going to be a big part of both of these teams' game plans. And then we're going to see which offense is able to create more first downs, more explosives off of them.
This was a great one that you brought up with me last week. And I probably wouldn't have really thought too much about it until you really kind of brought some of those numbers to my attention. And when I was rewatching some of the Chiefs film, it really does stand out just how many times they use that kind of RPO quick screen type of throw as a way to get out of some bad run looks, or they try and take advantage on the edge. And like you said, Kansas City has to tackle well. San Francisco is really going to have to tackle well on the edge. And I feel like I've cited 4 times during the year these 2 plays that the Bengals had nice quick screens. One was definitely to Jamar Chase, where he's breaking tackles. I think it was a 3rd and short or a 4th and short,
Mm-hmm.
but that's going to be a really, really big deal where Kansas City relies on that in a way, as you said, I think astutely, because they're not as comfortable with all of their pass catchers. And on the other side there, San Francisco, there's just been so many times this year where it's a 3rd and 12. They get McCaffrey or Deebo out to the edge. They motion him out on empty, and they just pick up 14 yards on these screens, which are so frustrating watching from the defensive perspective. They're obviously so awesome for the offense. We're watching left tackles get out all the way in space. It looks like there's just a wave of blockers. I'm thinking specifically about that Deebo Samuel long touchdown on a quick screen against the Eagles. It is a version of art. So that is going to be a fun one, because both teams, they rely on screens in some way. I'm wondering, is Shanahan's all right, it's 3rd and long, like screen is what we're kind of defaulting to. So I think that Spags will be hopefully prepared for that, but you can be prepared for whatever you want. If you can't tackle it, then you can't tackle it. And I think, speaking of tackling, we'll get to our next one here. I'm really curious which of the 2 defensive lines are able to create more negative plays in the run game. The 49ers defensive line is very attacking. They want to get up the field. That can lead to explosive kind of tackles for a loss, but then you can also get beaten on the edge. And as we said, I think that is a way that Kansas City should attack. On the other side, we're getting playoff Chris Jones, and all those players together really grinded out the Ravens when on the few instances that they did run the ball. I think Isaiah Pacheco is pretty rarely tackled for a loss.
Mhm.
McCaffrey ranked like a bit worse in tackle for loss percentage, but he's obviously such an incredible running back and a great big play threat. So I think that if, is it San Francisco's defensive line, they can get those TFLs, and then that leads to, or that takes some of the pressure off of that static defense on those second and third and longs. And then on the other side, if Kansas City is getting tackles for losses, then San Francisco has to play in a little bit more of a drop back pass game mode where, Kansas City, as much as those DBs are going to get challenged all day by San Francisco, I think that they can, at least close some of those windows where we probably won't see someone running like wide open across the middle of the field in zone coverage.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. In the run game in particular, Isaiah Pacheco, you're right. Like he doesn't get tackled for loss that often. Out of the 64 running backs that qualified, he has the ninth lowest tackle for loss rate in the league, so ninth best at not getting tackled. I think there's a lot of people that talk about his unique running style and how he kind of churns his legs, and I think like that plays a big role in that. McCaffrey is a top 5 running back in basically every single running back metric in the league except tackle for loss. He does get tackled sometimes just because he's looking to make that big play, and like it definitely balances out even more on the explosive side for him. But like that is something that if the Chiefs run defense does step up and have a big game in this game, like they could get McCaffrey for loss. And I think that when you look at the backup running backs in this game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the Chiefs side and Elijah Mitchell on the 49ers side, they are both pretty bad when it comes to tackle for loss rate. Like it's something that happens more often with them. So I think that because this is the last game of the season, the play callers will try to avoid using their backup running backs as much as possible. But sometimes the main running back needs a breather. So it's going to be about eliminating, avoiding those negatives when those backup running back, those RB2s are in the game.
Yeah, I think overall during the year, I probably spent not enough time praising, I think, what Kansas City, particularly their interior offensive line, has
Yeah.
done at different points. So it's going to be an interesting one. Tej, we're going to get to your last one here. We know how much you love yards after the catch. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about the kind of thought process behind, which defense is going to be able to limit yards after the catch in this one?
Yeah, so this I thought was super fun to look at. Both of these teams have specialized in yards after catch this season. 49ers 6.4 yak per reception, first in the league. Chiefs 6.16 yak per reception, second in the league. So Rashee Rice led all receivers with 654 yards after catch. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk ranked in the top 20. When you look at tight ends, George Kittle and Travis Kelce were third and fourth in yak respectively between those two. So like these teams are really able to turn completed passes into big plays. But I'm curious, like which team is going to be able to stop these yards after catch monsters from actually turning it into big plays. And I think it starts with the ability to not allow completions. I don't know if either team is going to be particularly better at tackling or being in the right position for stopping yards after catch. But I do think that the Chiefs are better at preventing completions. When you look at completion percentage over expected, they have the 5th best this year at negative 3.8%, which means that when opposing offenses throw on them, we can expect completions to happen 3.8% more often than they actually do against the Chiefs defense. The 49ers have a positive 0.5% CPOE, which is the 15th best in the league. So once you adjust for everything like down distance, yard line, air yards, the Chiefs are better at preventing completions. Both defenses, once a completion happens, are top 10 in yak over expected. So they do a good job of that. I don't think that there's much of a difference in that. But when just looking at which defense will do better at preventing the completion before a yards after catch opportunity can happen, I think the Chiefs are going to be better at that in this game.
Yeah, I think whenever we talk about San Francisco's offense, it's almost like understood that this offense is able to really eat up yards after the catch. It's designed in so many ways to be able to do that. I guess when I think of Kansas City, I think about that less, but yeah, it's awesome to see how high both of those teams are. I mean, 1 and 2, it is lovely to have that in this matchup. And for Kansas City to still find explosives where you're not able to do that with deep passes, that has to come from yards after catch. And, if I was to toss up like who is a better tackling team, I'm not really sure, but I feel like, Kansas City, like I just really have that Ravens game kind of like burned into my eyes a little bit, where it's like all of these players are making these high level tackles. And I really, really loved seeing that from Kansas City. So it's gonna be an awesome one to monitor throughout the game. And like it's so clearly like the way San Francisco, it feels like that they place an emphasis on, I think it was George Kittle was talking about it, where he was like, the coaching point was get near the sideline, like, and run really hard, really fast going forward. And that's like been so successful for them. Because whether you run out of bounds, obviously, as you mentioned, last game of the season can't hold anything back. So there'll probably maybe be like a little bit less of that, where people aren't conserving themselves for kind of down the line. All right, so let's get to the last one here. I am very, very curious of whose in-game management is going to be better between Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan. I am interested to see, what is the fourth down? What are the fourth down calls? Is it like, is someone going to be more aggressive than the other one? Is there going to be like an informed conservation of timeouts early in half so you can keep them for those end of half situations? And in those end of half situations, how aggressive is each team going to be closing the half? And the Super Bowl, usually it's not a shootout, and often it starts a bit slow. But Tej, I can picture ahead. We fast forward a week when we do our Super Bowl review that we're going to be talking about some of the in-game decision making with clear hindsight. It would be nice if we could have kind of nice vision going into the future. But why don't you talk to us a little bit about in-game management in this situation?
Yeah, so I want you to imagine you're at a Super Bowl party. You got terrible squares, and you're not winning anything off your Super Bowl squares. But if there's one thing that you can break out, you can look really cool. If you're allowed to talk during commercials, I got in trouble one time for talking during the commercials. But if you're allowed to talk during commercials, I think this is the thing to break out, is like, oh yeah, like look at how they're using their timeouts. Look at how Andy Reid is going for it on fourth down while Kyle Shanahan's being more conservative. Like I think that's going to be something that you can break out at the Super Bowl party that you're at, and like you go back to when they played in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, where the end of half situation, San Francisco got the ball with 59 seconds left before the end of the first half. They ran it on 1st and 10. The clock drained all the way to 26 seconds. They ran on 2nd and 7, and then they took a deep shot to George Kittle, where offensive pass interference ended up being called on Kittle. They kneeled and they went into halftime. I know that you don't want to give the ball back to Mahomes if you end up going 3 and out in that situation, but you want to see a little bit more aggressiveness when you go up against Mahomes, because you only get a limited amount of possessions. And this is a possession here, 59 seconds, multiple timeouts that San Francisco didn't take advantage of. You saw that in the Packers game a couple of weeks ago during the divisional round, where they kind of did the same thing before halftime, went into half, ended up getting their field goal blocked. So I think Shanahan is going to have to be a little bit more aggressive in this game, which I think he is capable of. But Andy Reid probably does have that game management edge in this game, because he's gotten better on fourth downs. He's lost that, people kind of making fun of him for his clock management from early in his career. I think he's gotten a lot better at that as well. And then, kickoff, punt return wise, I think the edge slightly leans to the Chiefs there as well, with how often they down kickoffs in the end zone. So, the margins in this game might be very thin, and like the 49ers are favored, and that's very justified. But when it comes to game management, I think that the Chiefs should be able to put out the higher plus EV decisions in this game. Even if that advantage could be marginal depending on situation.
I like to think Kyle Shanahan's overcome a few things even in the last 2 games. It feels like every Kyle Shanahan offense has never won a game when they're trailing by X amount of points. You get to change that from 0 and whatever to 1 and whatever. So but now that we're done kind of talking about the important stuff, I do want to hear more about this. So like being a timeout nerd, that sounds like a lot of fun at the Super Bowl party. The talking during commercial things, that's so interesting. Like maybe Tej, why don't you talk to us a little bit more about like what's the setup going to be for you on Sunday, or is it going to be like we have already talked about how like you're just pounding candy during these nerve-wracking games, but like, is this, do you view it as a communal experience? Is it, hey, we're going to have a bunch of people? Is it only like a trusted cabal of individuals? Talk to us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think for someone like the Super Bowl, have experienced it different ways. A big group of people, Super Bowl party, a small group of people who are really into the game. And I think I don't know if it, just means that like I'm older, I'm washed now. Like I prefer the latter. It's just I think it's just a better experience to watch it with people who are really into the game because they bring up a lot of points that you're not necessarily seeing in the game. I can come on this show next Tuesday and actually have stuff to talk to you about instead of like, oh, I thought the Paramount Plus commercial was cool, or like I didn't expect Usher to use that song first. Like I'm hoping I have actual insight. But where do you kind of stand on big Super Bowl party or like small collect group of people?
I mean, absolutely. I will say, I think it's been great that like a lot of places like they'll put out their ads beforehand. So I feel like if if you
That's
face
true.
this problem in the future, you be like, guys, I mean, open up Twitter. We're all looking at our phones anyway. Like, come on. I mean, I think it always depends on the group. I'm very lucky. Like my brothers and parents are like crazy into football, so we always get to share with it. And it's an event, so you gotta have kind of everyone there. And then, I mean, we haven't talked about Super Bowl food. We haven't talked about that. I'm really excited. I got 3 nephews. And so the oldest one, he is 5 or he's about to be, or, oh my gosh, Tish, I'm not going to say this into the mic. How old is he? Is he 4 or is he 5? But it's like, he like rooted for the Cowboys for a long time. And then the Cowboys lost. And then like he watches the Chiefs keep winning. Me and my brother were kind of rooting for the Ravens a little bit. He kind of goes against us and roots for the Chiefs. And then like, is it just going to be, he's a Mahomes kid where he's like, that Mahomes keeps winning, so he keeps rooting for it. And then he asked me, and I will say I think Kansas City's going to win. I'm rooting a little bit more for San Francisco. Obviously, always just rooting for good plays. And he's like, oh, maybe I'll root for the 49ers. And I'm like, come on, like what is this here? Obviously, fandom is dead, Tish, as we know. But that's going to be really fun. It's going to be really special to share with all those kids. All right, Tish, let's get
If
it.
I could give
Ahead,
one
yeah.
piece of advice to your nephew there as someone who was on the wrong side of Tom Brady and all of his success, it's better to root for the elite quarterback that's going to be in a lot of these games. I think it's a lot more fun to watch it when you're not just like straight up rooting against someone. So I'm interested to see what he does. He has a lot of thoughts going on. For a 4 almost 5-year-old here when it comes to rooting interest. Like I think I was pretty basic probably when I was his age. So I'm very impressed by that.
Yeah, he's. I want to say that he is 5 Tish. I'm not even sure if my brothers listen, but we'll. I'm sure I'll get a message about this. Last birthday party was great. So yeah, we're excited to see what goes forward with whatever his rooting interest is, whatever he chooses it to be. But as I said, Tish, yeah, we got to get out of here. Thanks everyone so much for listening to another episode of Stats and Scheme. Tell us what you like, what you didn't like, and if you think that Tish might be washed, visit sumersports.com to get all that good information that we talked about in our big game breakdown. I think the PDF has really good information in it. Tish thinks it has good information in it. So we hope that you also think that there is good information in it. But most importantly, enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time.